Welcome, ACPS students. Thank you for joining us. In order to ensure that all are able to access this presentation in their preferred language, we are providing simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, Amharic, and Arabic today. After the interpreters have provided their instructions, please press the globe icon that will appear at the bottom of your computer screen and select your preferred language. If you are watching on a phone, press the three dots at the bottom right of your screen and then select your preferred language. Thank you. Now, I'd like our interpreters to give instructions, starting with Spanish, then Amharic, then Arabic.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por venir a la reunión. Vamos a comenzar esta reunión. Si tienen acceso a interpretación, por favor, busquen el rectángulo donde dice español para que puedan escuchar toda la reunión en español. Gracias.
And now for Amharic instructions.
እንኳን ደህና መጣችሁ የኤሲፒኤስ ተማሪዎች ዛሬ ለምናደርገው የተማሪዎች ንግግር በቋንቋ በተለያየ ቋንቋ ለመናገር የምትፈልጉ ለአማርኛ ለምትፈልጉ የዓለም ምስል ያለባትን ተጭናችሁ አማርኛ የሚለውን በመጫን የአማርኛ ትርጉም ማግኘት ትችላላችሁ። Thank you.
بنرحب بالحضور في هذه الجلسة الثانية، ولكن بدنا ننوه بأنه إذا بدكم ترغبوا بالسماع بهذه المناقشة باللغة العربية فعليكم الاختيار إذا كنتم عم تستعملوا الكمبيوتر، وبالتالي تختاروا من هذا الجلوب اللي عند الشاشة بالآخر تختاروا اللغة العربية. ولكن إذا عم تستخدموا المحاضرة من تليفونكم في عندكم 3 نقاط بالتليفون فيكم تختاروا أي اللغة اللي بدكم إياها لسماع هذه المناقشة، وشكرا.
Now, let's welcome School Board Member Chris Suarez, who will introduce our panelists.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity today to facilitate our second student conversation with regard to the T.C. Williams renaming conversation that we're having as a school division. It's my distinct pleasure to both introduce our wonderful student panelists and to give an overview of what this process is going to look like. Before I do that, just looking at the slide that's on the screen, this again is our second conversation with students regarding the T.C. Williams renaming process. We had a conversation on October 7th, reflecting on the past and where we have been as a school division. Today, the focus is on the present, where we are now, and we are going to have a third student forum on October 20th discussing the future, where are we going. And so with that, I'd like to introduce the various students who are going to be speaking tonight. First is going to be Ashley Sanchez Villafara, who also serves as a student representative of the school board. Fina Owusu, Karam Burjas, Reese DuPont, who I also know serves as a member of the TAG Advisory Committee for the school board. Peter Rizkala. And finally, Lorraine Johnson, who is also a current student representative of the school board. Very excited to hear their perspectives today. But before we do that, I did want to provide a bit of an overview of the process and sort of run of show for today's student conversation. The way this will be structured is we're going to have 2 questions that are going to frame our discussion. After we give some time for everyone to provide some individual reflections, I will ask the first question and will afford the 6 student panelists the opportunity to provide their unfiltered, unvarnished views on the topic. Following that, we hope to have 10 to 15 minutes at the end of each question to open up the conversation to the public. And so at the end of the students providing their responses, I would ask that you raise your hand in the chat function or in the attendee function that's on your Zoom panel. And I will attempt to call on members of the public who wish to speak or comment on some of the students' reflections on the conversations. And so we will go through that process with respect to the first question, and then with respect to the second question, we'll go through the same process. And at the very end, I will offer some final reflections. Dr. Hutchings also will be on the call, and I will ask him for some final reflections at the very end of the conversation as well. But that really is the overview of what we're going to do today. And with that, I'll pass it on to Ms. Sanchez Villafara, who I believe is going to provide everyone with an opportunity to share some initial comments and reflections.
Thank you so much, Mr. Suarez. So we just wanted to start off with a quick check-in with everyone. So if you could put in the chat how you're feeling, what's on your mind today. So we just wanted to check in with everyone because we are students as well and we care about you all. So if you wouldn't mind of placing how you feel right now before we initiate our conversation. Thank you. I'll give a couple minutes. So. All right, so Mr. Suarez, I'm going to pass it back to you so you can start with the first question.
Okay, thank you so much. So the first question, and Ashley, you can start by be the first panelist to answer this question. How are you able to succeed in school without compromising your identity?
For me, I always found it difficult to not compromise my identity in academic spaces, knowing that I was the only student of color in these spaces. And I always found it difficult to find community with my fellow peers because of this reason, because I didn't really have anyone that looked like me, and I couldn't really find anyone that related to my circumstances. But throughout the past years, especially last year, I was able to truly shift my mindset into just focusing on ways that I can maybe, initiate conversations with my peers, because I always found it very difficult to do so. So I really found succeeding in by looking at the fact that I should have a very culturally responsive and just critically aware mindset overall. So that's kind of like the what I really internalize and try to practice being in my classrooms is just being able to hear what all students have to say and just knowing their backgrounds and circumstances to create like a mutual understanding with each other. Because once we have created a community and we are able to truly understand each other, we can really move forward in a positive way. So that's kind of the way that I've been able to really maintain and be myself, but also listen to other people and feel welcomed and comfortable in these spaces.
Okay, great. How about Fina? Can you provide some thoughts on that question?
So, speaking on my personal experience, I know that my first time being in an AP classroom, I did find myself compromising my identity a lot, just because I was one of the very few or one of the only students in the classroom. So overcoming that challenge, it really helped me to understand that I have to be Black unapologetically, and I have to love myself, and that regardless of the environment I'm in and who's in that environment, and regardless if they look like me or not, I should not have to compromise my faith or my identity.
And how about Karam?
Personally, being a part of student government, it can be isolating sometimes because there's this unspoken idea that, you know, we need to put on a mask when dealing with administration and adults near us. So we don't really always feel like we always have to be ourselves, because we kind of have to sugarcoat our feelings when asking for things and asking for help with student-led events. But what I realized is to be successful without having to compromise my identity, I surrounded myself with fellow students, created a community where I know, you know, we all are on the same page, we all understand each other, and we're all going through this at the same time. And knowing that I personally don't have to compromise myself when dealing with my peers, I highlight the fact that we should be dealing with our peers, because that's when we can be ourselves unapologetically. And that's when we can work with each other and get opinions and get ideas and help each other to execute, you know, events and things like that to the best of our ability. Because it's really then when I realized, you know, if I am constantly putting myself in situations where I'm not being myself, then I'm not doing my job correctly, because people, I have the privilege of being elected, and people want me. They don't want the sugar-coated version of me that I use to speak to, you know, administration at TC. So building that community with students is how I've really overcome that and managed to not compromise my identity and maintaining a successful student government initiative within the school year so far.
And how about you, Reese? What are some of your reflections on this question?
Yeah, I think that the fact that I don't feel like I have to compromise my identity when I'm within these spaces because everyone looks like me is a privilege. And I think that when we're having these conversations, it's important to remember the privileges that we have and to reflect upon those privileges. And I think that within TC, it's easy to say that that these students aren't being represented in these classrooms without kind of talking about the people who play a role within these systems. So the other students who are sitting by and letting their fellow peers not be represented or heard within these spaces. I think that's something that influenced in that.
Okay, and how about you, Peter?
Hi. So a lot of people may look at my name and sort of see that pairing, oh Peter, and there's this long last name, Riscala. And it seems that a lot of preconceptions are made.
So I'm not hearing Peter right now. Is there a muting issue?
Hello?
Yes, here you are.
Yeah, so I just want fellow first generation Americans to know, when you walk into that classroom, you don't have to prove yourself to anyone else except yourself. And you should not be subject to the preconceptions of other people in your class. You know, when my parents came to America, they were starting from scratch too. And when I was born here, I felt like I had a huge responsibility to do as much as I can to immerse myself with the American culture and bring anything home to my parents. So I feel like that having that motivation and not compromising your identity by being as authentic and proud of yourself is how you can become your true self and just be the best student that you possibly can be.
Great. And how about Ms. Johnson?
Lorraine could not make it today.
Oh, she couldn't. Okay.
Yeah, so we will just continue on with opening it up to the attendees and students.
Understood. So if there is a attendee who is interested in weighing in on this topic, please raise your hand in the student or in the Zoom box.
وهلا
Okay, I'm not getting any volunteers. So what I might just do then is ask some follow-up questions because our students offered.
I think we have 2 attendees who have their
Oh, we
hand.
do now. Okay, great. So how about Omna Berhanu? There you are. Maybe unmute her.
I wouldn't say that I've compromised my identity, like as I've kind of gone through high school. Like I definitely, like, if I had to ask myself from like the seventh, like not seventh grade, but my 14-year-old self, like, hey, like, have I like kind of sold myself out? I think she'd be like, no, you haven't. But I will say that I have definitely like um lost confidence over the years, like being in those white spaces and not fitting in at all. It is definitely like I've become really, really quiet, and like because of that, I have noticed that I've in some ways sometimes been like rather rude or tense to other people. And while I've kind of learned how to like gain confidence in these white spaces, it's something that I'm still working on. So while I wouldn't say that I've compromised my identity, it is something that I'm working on. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I thought there was one other person raising their hand, but I do not see that. Oh, Joel G. Is Joel?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Yeah.
It could be like hard, like we don't know like something, but you have to like try and study and might understand it, and like, yeah.
Great. Anyone else want to chime in who is attending? Okay. Well, oh, sorry. Yeah, so I guess then I'm just curious. You know, I appreciate all of you sharing your candid comments, and you know, a couple of the themes that I heard in from some of the students on the panel, and also our attendees, is this notion that you know, students of color in ACPS and TC, you know, sometimes feel that they have to suppress who they are, and also there was this notion of white spaces that came up, you know, some of the comments. And you know, I put it to the panel, you know, and any of you feel free to chime in. You know, what are some of the spaces that you feel in TC or in the division in general are quote unquote white spaces, and what are some of the things that you think the school board should be doing to make those spaces more welcoming? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on that.
I'm just gonna start. Just to answer your question, I feel like
La respuesta.
it's mostly those advanced rigorous courses that are the ones that are considered white spaces, because you see that the power dynamics in these classrooms are very disproportionate. And it's just like you feel like you have to conform to like the standards of these classes. You have to conform to the culture that these classrooms already have to feel accepted, when in reality you're the one that's making yourself uncomfortable and you don't feel like you can be yourself. So this whole notion of us talking about white spaces, based on of my experiences in all my high school career, for me it would just be the rigorous classes, so the honors, AP and DE courses, because this is where we see most prevalent this issue of having a disproportionate number of students of color to white students. And it's very frustrating and unfortunate because it doesn't truly reflect the diversity of our school and who we are truly. So if any other panelist wants to chime in on that.
So going off of what Ashley has said, I know speaking on my personal experience, I would walk in TC's hallways and it would be 90%, you know, African Americans, Hispanics. It would just be reflecting a lot of diversity. But then when I walk into an advanced placement classroom or an honors class or a DE class, 90% of the students are white. That's what we are referring to by white spaces. It puts minority students in this uncomfortable, suppressing type of feeling where our voices are suppressed, and it's just this oppressive environment, and it causes us to not do so well in our classes because it's like sometimes we can't speak, we can't participate because of this like overwhelming feeling of not feeling welcome.
And in terms of comfortability, a lot of the times from being in AP classes, I've noticed there's a complete discrepancy between people of color and white people in the classes. And I noticed a lot that when people of color want to actually, just regularly participate in the class, it can be hindered sometimes because there's not that level of comfortability, especially in classes like history, where there are very heavy topics about the treatment of Black people in our country. And a lot of times people of color do not want to speak up and say, oh, actually this, or, oh, I have a question on that, because they're scared of being like judged as this angry person or this person that has all these opinions, and not someone that is actually just asking a regular question about the curriculum and about the history itself. So it's kind of just a constant filter down. Like as Tina said, you walk into the hallways of TC and you see so many types of people, and then once you get into that class, it's like a complete filter, and there's only white people in there. And then within that, there's a whole other filter, and that's the communication part of it. And you as a student, you want to be comfortable speaking with your teacher, and you want to be comfortable participating in class and working in group projects. But if there's nobody around you that looks like you, especially since the amount of teachers of color are not people who teach AP classes, that does not create that level of comfortability in terms of communication and group work. So it's just like, people are expected to be the best student they can academically, but sometimes that social and emotional aspect can overtake it, and it can hinder your ability to be the best student that you can be. And I noticed that a lot within my AP classes, that a lot of times people of color do not speak up. And me having the privilege of my skin tone, I'm not white, but my skin tone gives me the privilege of knowing that, oh, I can easily make conversation with my teacher because there's not going to be a judgment on me. And I think that's a privilege, just like Reese noted on before, that a lot of people do not have. And I know that personally, Fina and Ashley have really struggled with that. And I think that's a complete disgrace for the academic system that we have here, to have this discrepancy when we have a huge school full of diverse students. And I think that that's really something that we focused on in the last panel too, and this panel, and just how we can really battle that issue and create comfortable spaces. So.
I definitely agree with what Kram is saying, and I think that not only are the curriculums that we're learning, not only are they whitewashed, but you go into these classrooms and they're whitewashed, and everything that these spaces are conducive to is only geared towards white students. And seeing as how my whiteness plays a factor in my academic success, that should not be something that we have to continue to talk about, and especially within a public school, and especially within a school like TC Williams, where the white student body represents the minority of students at the school. This should not be the cases within these advanced courses. They should not look like the way that they do currently. And I think that when we're having these conversations, it's important to remember how white privilege plays a role within how the structures of these classes, and also the structures within the school.
De la escuela también.
Yeah, going off of what sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, there you go. You got it.
Okay. Going off of what Reese said, I think it also comes down to the teachers that we hire. I know that in AP classes, most of the teachers do not look like me, especially when it comes down to teaching AP US history or AP World. and we have the topic of slavery and just hard-hitting topics like that, especially being like one of the very few Black students in an AP US history classroom. I know that it can be difficult to be taught, especially since the narrative has been changed over the years. I just think that we should also look into like the people we hire, because ultimately we look up to our teachers. We ask our teachers for help. And when it comes down to like being uncomfortable to even ask my teacher for help, or just staying after school to just, you know, ask her a few questions, it comes like, it feels like it's just uncomfortable, because it's like, I know she's looking at me different because I'm one of the few Black kids in the classroom. I know she sees me as this angry Black little girl. So it's like this uncomfortability between the relationship in me and my teacher.
I think it's really important that Fina mentioned the relationship between the student and the teacher, because when we don't have validation from our peers, our second step is to go to the adult figure in the classroom. And that is sort of where we get our closure and how we understand like what is going on in the classroom. And if we're unable to get both support systems, then that's sort of where the conflicts arise.
And I just wanted to touch on like really quickly of what Fina said about this whole idea of like teachers, especially in rigorous courses, perceive you just as the angry Black girl or just as the Black student. It's very difficult because I've noticed that myself and a lot of other students of color feel like they're only seen for the color of their skin. They're not truly seen for what they can bring to the table. They're you know, how intelligent they are, what they know, their personality. They just see us for our color. They see us more as part of a marginalized and oppressed group rather than as an individual. And it's been very unfortunate not to have the privilege or the ability to be seen as who you are. And you can't do that because you're in these spaces where it's predominantly white, and you already feel singled out, and you already feel like you just self-reflect a lot on who you are as yourself, and you look at yourself more as, oh, I'm part of the whatever community you identify with, instead of I'm a student and I deserve to be in this academic space as well.
So thank you all for sharing those thoughts. One other sort of follow-up question I have, and I think you all touched on it a bit when you talked about how when you have a teacher who, you know, has the right mindset, perhaps comes from you know, a background of color as well, they might have more compassion, understanding, things of that nature. I'm kind of wondering, what are some examples you have seen where T.C. Williams has gotten it right, where the environment has felt welcoming, and what are some suggestions you all have in terms of making the environment at T.C. Williams more welcoming, both in terms of the AP, you know, and advanced classes, but also just more generally?
So I can speak on this. So recently this year in my AP language arts class, I had a teacher, her name's Miss Kiak. And walking into her classroom, I automatically got a sense of like, you're welcome here, regardless of what you look like, your belief, your identity, your sexuality, regardless of what you identify as, like, you're welcome here. And I think like hiring more teachers that give off this feel of like, you're always welcome, regardless of who you are. And I know that being in Miss Cat's classroom has really gave me the confidence to walk into other classrooms, just to understand that although I may not be welcome in that classroom, I should not be ashamed of who I am or even compromise my identity to just fit in.
And Fina's very fortunate to have that case for her in her classes. And I know that personally, I have not witnessed such a collaborative environment from my class experiences. So specifically for our school, for TC, I know that this level of community where kids do have this level of comfortability that we are speaking about, it has come through a lot of times, like with what we do as in our extracurricular time, like then we have the Black Student Union, and we have all types of different clubs where people can then leave from their classroom and go and join a community and be a part of something. And I know specifically for this senior year so far, the events that the senior class government has put together had truly one goal, and it's not just to have fun, but it's to create a level of community that people can know to go to. We all had a really rough first day of school. Like, we never really expected our first day of school to be like this. So to have, like, for example, we had our last first day event at Chinkapin. To have that level of community, knowing that, oh, after school, I'm going to see my friends. I'm going to be with people that I know. I'm going to be with people that look like me. That is really that's kind of what has kept TC afloat. Without the extracurriculars and the things that the student leaders have put together for the students, I think that a lot more kids will be struggling right now. And I think it's very important to constantly create that level of community, but now not only have it be after school, but it has to seep into every single classroom. And teachers like Miss Kiak, I know her very well. She has been able to cross that line and make that level of community in her classroom. And the solution to that for other teachers is to emphasize that they should be striving to do that. And it's a learning opportunity for them as well to figure out how they can make the best community and comfortability for all students, no matter what their color is in the classroom. And I think that's how it needs to seep in to all aspects of the school day and not just after school.
Yeah, I definitely
totally.
agree. Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Go ahead, Reese. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think in terms of extracurriculars, that's a great space and opportunity to create a group of people that kind of unite under common values and interests. But I also think that the classroom should be a space where you don't have to unite under common interests or values. It should be a space where you get together or have conversations with individuals that you may not otherwise meet or talk to. And I personally, that's where I had that opportunity, was in Miss Kiak's class. And I think that we can't rely on having incredible teachers create these opportunities for us, that should be a given. Like, that shouldn't be a rare opportunity where we have a teacher that is inclusive of students that don't look like her. That should not be a rare opportunity. And I think that emphasizing that and making that a priority to hire teachers that look like the demographics of TC, and also encouraging students and having these conversations where students can learn from each other and understand when they're complicit in the classroom, they're not just affecting themselves, they're affecting everyone else that's in there.
I just want to go off of what Reese said with hiring teachers. I think it's not just teachers, it's counselors as well. Because I've had personal friends tell me that my counselor told me not to take this AP class because it would be too hard for me. Or like, my counselor told me to take discrete math instead of AP calculus or AP prob and stats. And these are people that are very close to me that I know are intelligent, that can do the rigorous work, that can, pass the class. But it all comes down to the motivation that comes from our teachers, our counselors, and not even just our peers, but just the entire community at TC. It's like I know personally I don't have this experience. I just want to thank my counselor for that. But I know other students do have the experience where the counselor belittles them because they are a Black or brown student, or their counselor would put them in classes that they think is best for them, when it's not really about how the counselor should feel. It should be what's best for the student.
Great. Well, thank you all for sharing that, and appreciate your candor and honesty about some of the things you're experiencing. And those are definitely things that should happen, and I hope will happen as the school board and the school division works to improve equity within the division. So I'd like to now move on to the second question, and that question is, knowing the brand we have created with the name TC Williams, how do you think this hinders our ability to create inclusive, equitable spaces for all students? So, and I'd like to sort of amend the question of thinking about, how does the brand we've created with the name TC Williams hinder us, but also I'd love for you each to comment on what would changing the name TC Williams mean to you as a student at TC. And whoever wants to start.
So I'm just gonna go ahead and
Great.
start. So I think if we just solely think about just the brand and the name and kind of the fame we've created with the name TC Williams as the sole reason for it being that we should not rename the school, is just completely wrong. I feel like right now we're at a time and in a space where not all students feel comfortable going to a school named after someone that didn't want them there. And keeping the name as it is now just doesn't reflect who we are truly as students, because we shouldn't be thinking about we shouldn't be thinking about the movie. We shouldn't be thinking about past generations. We should be thinking about the students now and how they feel, because we're the ones currently experiencing many of the systemic issues that we see within our school division. So it just, keeping the name based off of the brand just hinders our ability to make all students feel inclusive, and comfortable and supported and just respected in these spaces. And it just contradicts and goes against what we stand for as a school division, which is equity. Equity is at the center and at the heart of everything. And we've made a vow that we were going to make sure that all students feel supported and comfortable in these spaces. So I just think that keeping the name as it is now would just completely contradict everything that we have stood for from this point on. And just for me personally, just renaming the school would mean just unity. Like, the first thing that comes to my mind is just unity and just a new beginning, and just a moment of redefining who we are. And that's really meaningful, because given the space given the time we're in now and the space that we're in, it's just important to have those meaningful conversations with each other. And it's important for us to understand each other's differences and to have that form of healing, because there are a lot of unsaid things that we have not discussed. And I just feel like renaming that is just the first process and the first step of many that we still have to take. And then I just hope that after we decide what name the school will take, we continue on with this so it's not left behind, because there are so many things that we still have yet to fix within our school division, and so many things that we have yet to really reflect on individually as students.
So I think that ACPS needs to start walking how they preach, because we talk a lot about equity and, equality and fighting against social injustice and fighting for racial justice. But we don't reflect that within our schools. And then we name our school after somebody who's a racist and a segregationist who didn't even want students that look like me and Ashley or other Black and brown students to even enter in his school. I think that it comes down to we're chanting his names at pep rallies and games. We're screaming TC Williams, but us as students, we're not really understanding why the school is even named after him in the first place. I know when I first found out who TC Williams was, I was very disturbed by it, especially since Alexandria City is extremely diverse. Well, TC is extremely diverse. So to know that the school is named after somebody who did not stand up for diversity, and even at that, created things like the tag program and just hindered African American students and brown students as well from being academically successful. I think that it is very important and crucial to change TC's name, because if we're going to talk about equity and telling our Black and brown students that we care for you and have lessons in the morning, the SEAL lessons that we have, but do you really care for us when you name our whole entire school, our brand, quote unquote, is named after a racist man? I think if you really do care about your students, you would change the name. And I know that on top of walking into a school with and on top of walking into a classroom where nobody looks like me, I have to walk into the hallways knowing that this school is named after somebody who probably wouldn't even want me in his surroundings or in his presence. It's very disturbing.
And to talk specifically about the brand, I think that, well, I know that since 9th grade, 10th grade, and mostly all of 11th grade, speaking about race and racism and white privilege has been very taboo at our school. People did not want to speak about it. People thought, oh, here we go. Here's another colored student who has something to say about race. They want to make everything about race. It's this very taboo discussion that it has been. And that is really because of the brand that we built. It's with the name TC Williams and with the movie Remember the Titans and with school pride, because it's like, oh, you have a problem with our school. You think that there's problems with racism at our school. That equals that means you have no Titan pride. Like, it means that you have something to say against the school and not really against the community within the school. The brand TC Williams has hindered people from being able to speak their truth because they're worried of being called someone who is just hates their school, just loves to hate on the school, has no school spirit. And because of that, kids have not been able to really speak up. But since coronavirus had hit, I think a lot has changed. A lot of us have spoken out tremendously, much more than we have in the past 3 years of our high school experience. And I think that's just because finally, people are understanding, like Fina hinted on, what the history of this name means and what it implies for the people at our school. And in terms of hindering our ability to create inclusive and equitable places for all students, it's the same thing, because we're realizing that, now people can speak about race freely, and not be worried about being called someone who has no school spirit. And I think that's very important now. And just like Ashley said, renaming the school is a symbol of redefining a new chapter for all of us as students. It should not just be, now the class of 2021 has really spoken up about race. But what about when we graduate? Is this momentum still going to move on? All of the panelists here are seniors, and we've all been heavily involved in what has been going on in the school the past couple weeks and the past couple months. But once we graduate, we're left asking ourselves, is this momentum going to continue? And we know that this momentum will continue if there are big changes made, like renaming the school and reformatting the equity within AP classes, because that will linger and transfer into our succeeding classes. And it will show that, people do care, and that momentum will continue on. So it's very important to rebrand, to restart, because if we do not restart, we're just going to keep, moving one step forward, but we're going to stay those 5 steps back. And I think that's crucially important in moving on and moving forward and creating a better space for all students.
I agree with Karam. I think when we're having these conversations about what ACPS can do better, I think the first thing is recognizing that you can't dismantle these systems of discrimination and oppression without actually owning up to the past. And TC Williams represents the past of what TC was like, of segregation within TC, and of the history of racial injustice within our community. And I think that the first step of actually owning up to that past is by changing the name of TC Williams.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And some may argue that this has held, a lot of precedence for the people at the school, but we need to create a new precedent rather, because there are many people at our school who still feel marginalized because of these lingering components like Karam was talking about, these lingering histories at our school. And we just need to learn how to adapt to it. And it shouldn't just be reduced to a name change. It should be a community change for the greater good.
Real quick, go off of what Reese and Karam are saying. I think that it's important to understand that we have to redefine our brand, because the movie is Remember the Titans, not Remember TC Williams. And even TC being named after, our school being named after TC, somebody who is a racist and a segregationist, goes against the entire overarching meaning of the movie. I know that many of us have seen that movie a million times within our classrooms. The whole meaning of the movie was unity, especially racial unity, regardless of what you look like and the color of your skin. I think that having our school named after somebody who was completely against everything that the movie stood for is just contradicting. And also, I think that renaming TC is the first step to dismantling a racist and oppressive academic system.
And I think just one thing to add is even to be able to have conversations in the classroom and encourage teachers to have conversations about this topic is something that could spark conversation and allow students who may not be able to access this conversation or be able to come to these conversations so that they can actually be heard within this process. And I love that this is a student-led process, and I think it should continue to stay that way. I think renaming TC is, obviously it affects the staff of ACPS, but I think that the students have been the ones to kind of start this and take charge, and I think that that should remain.
Well, thank you all for those really thoughtful comments. I would at this time like to give the public attendees a chance to raise their hand if they would like to provide some thoughts based on some of the comments the students have made or their own thoughts. So I'll just wait a moment to see if anyone wants to do that. Okay, well, I'll leave that option open for folks if anyone in the public does want to chime in. I'll again just ask a quick follow-up question. I thought all of your remarks were really thoughtful, and you know, one of the things I really liked, you know, in some of the student comments is that how the TC Williams name change could reflect a sort of beginning of a healing process, and that, you know, this isn't going to end with just a rename of TC Williams, that there really has to be a longer term vision around this. So I'd love to kind of, and also the comments about redefining the brand and so forth. And so I'd love to hear some of the student views on, you know, what that might look like. I think you all made some comments to that effect, but you know, what do we take from the past and use as a lesson to sort of redefine the future based on the reflections you all have had as TC students?
I can start. So I just wanted to touch base on something that Racy, Karam, and Peter kind of noted about this whole notion of, you know, if we don't change it, it'll just continue to perpetuate what we see within our school division. And that just speaks on so many levels, because racism itself, it's something that's so deeply ingrained in American society and in our education system, that if we just continue on doing what we're doing and we go on about our business as normal, we will continue to self-perpetuate these systems, and these systems will continue to exacerbate the experiences of marginalized communities and the experiences of students of color. And for me, I think that what we can truly take from our past to, you know, redefine ourselves and, you know, look forward into the future is just, you know, creating those spaces and creating a new narrative for ourselves. And honestly, some people might be very skeptical and might think that we need to fit what we want as a vision for us into the existing models that we have, but we don't really need to do that. We can just create new ones for ourselves, new ones that truly reflect who we are as students and who we truly want to be as a community. And for me, I just think it's just creating those spaces for students and creating a new narrative which truly defines who we are as a school community and which truly reflects what we stand for as a school division, which is just equity focused and just overall just inclusive of student backgrounds and student circumstances.
And internally already, I have witnessed so many changes with in regards to the name TC Williams. I know that, you know, in the senior class, as senior class president, I've like headed the notion to make sure that our class t-shirts does not have the name TC Williams on it. Right now we have Titans class of 2021, and within the school store, the TC school store where all the merch is sold, the teacher, Mrs. McCormick, has already made sure that the merch does not have that name on it. And it's just like, we can do all of the changes that we want internally within the school, like Ashley said, creating these spaces, but then it's like, oh, so we have to really do that all for ourselves. But the people in charge and the people above us within the school board, within administration, that name not being changed, it's like, why is it still there? We have worked already to create these spaces and make it more comfortable for everybody, and just completely, truly delete the name out of our Rolodex. We have not included that name in anything in our social media. We have not included that name anywhere on our merch, t-shirts, event posters, anywhere. So it's about what message does the school system want to give to the students, that, oh, it's only the students that care, but the adults do not, and that's why the name's not changing. Or it's only the students who care and the adults do not. That's why it's taking so long for this process to even begin. For years and years, people have been speaking about this name, but it's only when the students really decide to take action, we then expect the adults to take action as well. But currently, it's not really looking like that, because we are seeing all of these changes that we're making internally, but when the name of the school is still on the building, and it creates a problem, because it's like, once again, 10 steps back, 2 steps forward. We're not really getting anywhere. And that's really like the main problem. As students, we can head any initiatives that we want to really combat the systemic issues, but it's like when the bigger person is not just deleting that title, we're still remaining in that bubble. We're still remaining under that title. So we never really feel like we're really making an impact when it's still that name.
What Mom said, I can definitely see that it has been happening internally, where we've deleted the name from like the school stores, our class t-shirts, and just like our attire that we wear that represent Titans. And I think that before we even talk about like, you know, the steps we're gonna do after, you know, if we do change the name, or if the school board does decide to change the name, I think we need to discuss that we need to change the name. Like, we can't run 20 steps ahead and not look at the first step. Like, the first step is recognizing that we're holding on to a past, we're dwelling onto a past that does not represent or reflect ACPS as a whole. And once we decide to take that and acknowledge that, then we can sit down and have these type of conversations where we're like, okay, yes, we do need to change the name, because this is not who TC reflects. I mean, this is not who Titans are. This is not who we want to stand for. I think that when we continue to scream TC Williams at our pep rallies and at our games and just stuff like that, and like when the students keep telling the school board and the administration that we don't want this name anymore, like we want to change the name, it then becomes a problem where Karan was saying that it's like the students are working so hard for it, but the teachers and adults just don't really care. I know that a lot of times the school board and administration is asking for more student voice, but we're screaming so loud, yet you can't hear us. Like, we're telling you that we do not want the name anymore, but yet you still want to continue hearing from us. Like, how long do we have to scream, yell, and shout for you to understand that we do not want to be named after him anymore?
100%, exactly what Fina said. Because really, amongst our peers, we're all really screaming Titans. We are established that Titans, we are all Titans. That is the community. That is what unifies us all. The name itself means absolutely nothing. And it has come to a point where, why are we still holding on to it? We have established a community as Titans, as students, and we have not really ever took on the name TC Williams as something that's actually very important. And it's made us look like, what are we caring about? Where do our priorities lie? And that's exactly what Fina was saying. I completely agree with her, and I think that needs to be completely that needs to reverberate throughout all discussion.
Thank you all for that. Yeah. Go ahead, Ashley.
Mr. Suarez, we have someone that raised their hand, Lindsay. So if we can take her off of mute so she can speak.
You read my mind. So, Lindsay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I got reconnected. I want to say that I don't think that the name change should have any remorse to it. This is not up for discussion. Having white supremacists as a high school name is not really a topic of like, you know, any like conversation. It just needs to be changed. And I just hope that the school board members can see that we are like using our voices and doing things to help assist in the name change, and things just need to get done. So.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And yeah, I think at this point I'm supposed to offer some sort of reflections, and I just want to say, you know, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to the students, all of you, for your comments, particularly your candor. You know, these are not easy conversations to have, but in Alexandria, in my personal view, we need to make them easier. We need to have them more often. I very much appreciate your candor, your bluntness, frankly, on some of these issues. We need to get to that point as a school division where we're having these conversations in that way. And so I really appreciate that. And, you know, and I will say, you know, from my personal perspective as a school board member, you know, the school board, we have to own the fact that we perpetuated this. We perpetuated it for a very long time, and that, you know, we aided and abetted T.C. Williams, you know, during this time of segregation, you know, that happened many, many years ago. And so, you know, it is incumbent on the board to listen to your voices, take them seriously, and act upon them. And so what I'd say to the students is, you know, hold us accountable, you know, continue to speak your truth, continue to, you know, give us comment, have these conversations. And I know members of the board want to continue to have these conversations, and but it's not all your responsibility. And I want to make that very clear from my perspective, that it's the school board's responsibility as well. And you know, we very much appreciate just all of you taking your time to share your comments and to be honest with us, and all those sorts of things. And it's been very clear to me from this conversation. I mean, I've heard many of these things before, but both the disproportionality in the division in terms of AP, you know, classes and get and tag and all of those sorts of things it continues to be a huge problem in the division. And this notion of the environment being welcoming to all students. You know, some of the comments I heard personally, I found very troubling, that students don't feel welcome to you know, speak their truth and say what's on their mind, you know, in classes. And so we need to address that and solve those problems as a division. So I just wanted to you know, end with some of those remarks. And, you know, it's not over here. Obviously, we have the third student forum, and I encourage the public to tune into that student forum on the 20th as well. As it says on the slide, see you on the 20th. I believe now that Dr. Hutchings is here, and I wanted to pass it to him to add some final remarks for the community.
So thank you, Mr. Suarez. And I just want to say thank you to all the panelists, all of our student panelists today. Thank you for speaking your truth. And you all said it well. You said that we really need to listen to our young people, and you all need to be leading the way on this. And this is why this community forum is so important, to have you all actually speaking from your experiences and from your personal truth. So I just say thank you. I mean, it is remarkable to see young people able to articulate specifically what they know is happening in their school and in their school division. And that you all are saying, you know what, the time is now to change the narrative, and that you're tired of talking about it, and let's take action. And I just say, hats off for you to have that courage. I also want to just apologize for, I saw the comments earlier that somebody posted on here, and that's something I think we need to start addressing, for someone to have the audacity to write, you know, that type of language. And still today, 2020, that we're experiencing some of the things that people in the 60s who were trying to fight for civil rights at that particular time. And also right here in this community, in the city of Alexandria, had comments like that said to them. And you fast forward to 2020, and we have young people still receiving comments like that in a public forum, which is completely unacceptable. So I just want to apologize, and not for that person, but the fact that you had to see that. And that also reminds us to the fact that this is so important. This work is so important for us to do that we have to be relentless and unapologetic about getting it done. I finally just want to say, I want to remind everybody out there to please take the community survey about the Identity Project. It will allow for us to get some feedback around this work and to hear from people who are not able to be a part of some of these Zoom panels. But that will be released tomorrow in our ACPS Express. So please just pass the word. And I'll just conclude by saying thank you all so much. I mean, you all are the epitome of Titans. This is what Titans are all about. You know, I'm a graduate of TC Williams too. I like to refer to myself as a Titan, not as TC Williams. I can tell you that. So I say hats off to you all and congratulations for a job well done today. Thank you.